Hello.
Yeah, I just have to
Right.
headphones.
It's what it is, isn't it?
Oh, well, anyway.
Yeah. Do you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine now, yeah.
Brilliant. Bill, thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Bill, you started at the BBC, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Many years ago, I went to Birmingham University. I did a music degree, and it came to leaving, and I thought, I had no idea what I was going to do. And my sister worked for the BBC, and so she suggested, why don't you go? They call them studio managers, which is another word for a sound engineer. So I went for an interview, and I got the job. So that was 1976. So I worked there till 1982. So it was about 6 years, really good fun. All kinds. I worked in Radio 1 to Radio 4 to the World Service, all that kind of stuff. So it was good times actually, and a good training in terms of recording. Because the last few years, I ended up working at Maida, Vale, doing sessions, which was fantastic. Did a lot of work with John Peel. So they were good times. Lots of early 80s was brilliant because there were lots of bands, new bands coming through, like the Police, Elvis Costello, Pretenders, all that kind of stuff. So I got to work with some great people.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a good time. I remember it well. Yeah, you're okay, mate. I've got a Coke today.
Oh, well, I'm on peppermint tea. Very healthy.
But then, did you form Shakatak in 1980?
1980, we formed Shakatak while I was still working at the Beeb.
Yeah.
So for 2 years, I had a day job and I was working with the band. So we were touring around the country, and I managed to sort of wangle some time off and stuff. I had a very understanding boss. And when I actually left the Beeb in 1982, I think I owed them about 3 or 4 weeks leave. So they were very kind. It was a great, because I was working in music from a different point of view, but they were really understanding, and it was nice. Even when I was starting to do Top of the Pops, I still was working at the BBC. So it was kind of, I think they thought it was kind of nice that I was doing okay, and I used to promote the Beeb obviously a lot because I was still working there. So it was kind of weird when we did the very first Top of the Pops. It was either the first or the second, because they just started. John Peel started on the show again. So I remember we actually went together with his producer down to TV Centre, and I think that's why when we did the very first one together, he used to introduce me as his mate Bill Sharpe. But then, I think it was like yet another awful shirt or something like that. So it was kind of fun, really. So there was and I remember doing a session at Maida Vale, which was a Shakatak session, and I was due to record it. So you could kind of say there was a little bit of a conflict of interest, maybe, but it was great. And then a tour of Japan came up in early '83, so I had to make a decision that I needed to leave. And I remember Peel and his producer John Waters came in, and they had a copy of Music Week, and they said, "Bill, your album's just gone in, Nightbird's just gone in at number 4. Don't you think it's time to give up the day job?" So I did, and the rest is history, as they say.
But then, how did you get involved with Gary then?
Well, that was just pure coincidence, actually. We worked probably from our Invitations album. We started working at a place called Rock City, which was owned by Gary and run by a guy called Brian Adams, who we knew. So he got us in the studio and liked it there. It's a really, really nice place. So we did quite a few records there, mixing and stuff. And we did Invitations, Out of This World, Down on the Street, those albums. A lot of it we recorded at Rock City. And then I think we were away somewhere in another studio, and the A&R guy said to me, we talked about making a solo album. He said, "Do you fancy doing a solo album?" So I said, "Yeah, it'd be great." So they actually, very kindly, they bought a really beautiful piano for the studio. So I recorded the whole album there. And it so happened the guy I was working with was a guy, ironically, actually, today is sadly Nick Smith, who was the guy that was the engineer on the album and worked with Gary, hence the connection. But today, actually, 19th of September, it's 9 years ago, sadly, he passed away. This is
Oh.
the anniversary today. We were great friends. He was probably my best friend. But going back to the time, Nick had been working with Gary on his albums, and I had this song. We'd finished this track called Change Your Mind, which was on the album. And I actually attempted to sing it, which was, we decided within about 5 minutes was, it wasn't going to work. So he said, well, why don't I ask Gary if he fancies doing it? So I think we ran off, in those days, probably ran off a cassette, and he got it to Gary, who listened to it and said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So we suddenly thought, well, that's pretty cool. And the track was completely finished, the backing track. So Gary came in, and obviously hadn't worked. It was great, really, that Nick had worked with him, because he knew the sound he liked to get at that time, where he put a little bit of harmonizer and some delay on his voice. And as soon as Nick did it, it was like suddenly it was Gary's sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he did the song, and maybe 1 or 2 takes. He listened through, nailed it, because I did a sort of demo vocal thing of the melody, and we all sort of sat back and thought, wow, this is pretty good. We'd had all the backing vocals as well. Tessa Niles, Linda Taylor did the backing vocals, and we just sat back. And then I think a couple of days later, the guy from Polydor came down, and we played him the track, and he was like, wow. And they just knew it was going to be a hit record. Yeah. And it was just one of these things. As soon as he put his vocal on, it just was like, well, you in the past, when we've been making records, you get to a point, you think this is going to be a hit. But that one was like, bang, as soon as Gary did his vocal, that was it. We thought, my God, this is great. We'd had a lot of fun doing the production, Nick and I. We used to have a real laugh. And as I said, it was great because Gary was, he was quite quiet. I don't know about shy, but obviously we hadn't really worked together. So it was great having Nick as the kind of pivotal guy to sort of go between us, so to speak. And it was, when we finished it, it was like, wow, great. And I listen to the track occasionally. Somebody puts on Facebook or something, and I'm still really proud of that song particularly, because it just works.
It stands the test of time. It still sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. Weirdly enough, it was played, maybe earlier in the year. I was driving to a gig somewhere, and Paul Gambaccini was doing the Pick of the Pops, and they picked 1985, and it happened to be, the track was at number 20 then, just gone at number 20. And so I hadn't heard it on the radio for years, and I just thought, wow, it still sounds great. So
it does.
Really proud of it.
My wife put it on Alexa the other night, because she said, I do like that Gary Numan song.
I know, obviously things, with my experience of, and I've had lots of mainly really nice comments from, his fans. And Nick and I used to go when we'd done that, we were doing the album together, we go to the occasional gig at, say, Hammersmith, whatever. And everybody was really nice. I didn't get any too many insults and stuff, because I know fans can be a bit divided about whether they like it or not, which is, that's music really. But generally, it's been, really, people have been really kind about it, which is great.
Because it was the album you were doing, it was Famous People, wasn't it?
Famous People was the album.
Yeah, and which is a completely different thing from what you were doing.
It was kind of a bit of a, when I listened back to the album, it was a bit of a mishmash really of all my different kind of tastes. So it's I can't say as an album it hangs together musically, because a lot of the tracks are very different. There's some more jazz, big band stuff, because in those days we had the budget to get an orchestra, all that kind of stuff. So that was fun. I'd always wanted to do that. And then I did some more slightly electro-poppy stuff. And then, just got some people, mainly a lot of people that Nick knew actually. It was mostly his contacts that came into play on the album. And it was nice for me in a way, because it was totally separate from the band. So the only connection really with the band was the fact, obviously, that Roger, our drummer, wrote the words to Change Your Mind and all the other songs on the album. So yeah, it's a bit of an eclectic mix of an album. So I can't say, because Change Your Mind is so different from the other tracks. And in a way, when we did the Automatic album, it fitted in much better with that album, because it was a me and Gary album. But it was just one of those things. I just had the song, and I thought, well, let's see what we can do, and it just ended up becoming this sort of electro pop sort of mad thing with loads of Nick was doing all kinds of wonderful things on the sound desk to make all these weird, wonderful effects. And yeah, just kind of, even when we had the backing track, we just liked the backing track.
But it's funny actually, because I did listen to one of your albums there the other day, and there's a real jazz version of Change Your Mind on there. On one.
Oh yeah, I did a famous people. I got a band together to. It was really actually in the memory of Nick. Actually, that was the main reason for doing the album. And I actually I mailed, because Gary and I still communicate with email and stuff. So I mailed him. I just said, would you fancy doing a little introduction? Because he'd worked with Nick a lot, you know. Nick was a great guy. So he did. So I did and then I wasn't going to do it because I thought, well, how can we do the song? Because I can't recreate it. I mean, it's just, I don't think we'd ever play it live because it was just mad. All this, as I said, all Nick's sound effects. So Tessa Niles, who worked with Gary a fair bit, and she did a load of. She was a big session singer in the '80s, particularly, and she'd worked a lot with Eric Clapton, and she worked on his Unplugged, one of the first Unplugged things on MTV. Oh, and she said, "Well, why don't you do a similar kind of vibe to what we did with Layla?" And I thought, well, actually, that could work really well. So we just, in the rehearsal, we worked around with the groove a little bit, and then just came up with a completely different version because it was the only way we could do it. Sorry?
It is completely different, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's, as I say, there's no way you can recreate that track. So it had to be done very differently. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed doing it in that style. And I guess in a way, a song, if you can do it in sort of loads of different styles and it works, then hopefully that means it's a good song. So
it's really funny. It's only over the last few years I've sort of quite got into jazz. I think I was so Numanized that I couldn't.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? If it didn't have a symphony, I wasn't really getting too involved with it. But for some unknown reason, I really got into jazz of late. And so when I heard that, it was really nice to hear it. You know, I mean, a long time ago, I wouldn't have listened to it. But nowadays, because you know the song and the whole different arrangement of it, it was really good. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun to do actually, and it was a great album to do, because there were few people who actually had played on. I tried to get as many people who were available who played on the record. So obviously Tessa was on it. Linda wasn't available. The guitarist Mitch Dalton played on the album. So there were a few people who had the connection with it. And it was lovely that Gary, you know, he said some nice things about the track, and I loved it when I think he said something like, well, I can't, he said, it's such a long time ago. He said, I can remember the track. He said, and it's amazing considering I can't remember what happened yesterday. So it was a nice thing, and I think nobody knew it was going to happen. So suddenly, when we started, before we played the track, and suddenly, hello, I'm Gary Numan. Everybody's like, my God, where's that coming from? And it was a lovely surprise that he'd taken the time to do it. So that made it really, really special.
But then you did New Thing from London Town. Was that a year later, a couple of years later? I can't remember.
Yeah, there was a Matt who was he worked at Numa Records with Tony. After Change Your Mind had happened, nobody had really said anything about doing any more work together. So he came along and said, would you like to do another track with Gary? So I said, yeah, sure. I had this song, again, I'd written with Roger years ago, and I thought it might work quite nicely if we did it in a very sort of strong electro kind of vibe to it. And so we did the backing track, and it was the same kind of thing, really. I just went in with Nick, and we just got these big drum sounds, and it has to be very different to, obviously, the Shakatak stuff, and you can't really, on a musical sense, you can't have any sevenths or anything, or jazzy chords particularly, because it just doesn't work. So it was much straighter kind of musically for me. And then again, you know, Gary came and did the vocal, and so that went out on Numa. And I think, you know, got a, I mean, we did the video for it, which was
yes.
interesting. Well, it's great because Beryl, obviously, I thought, I have to look. I can't smile. It's not sort of smiley stuff. So we're all looking like really serious. And of course,
Yeah.
there was the vertically challenged guy who sort of was dressed up like a kind of star trooper, stormtrooper rather. So it was great to do it really, and sort of just walking around with some sort of smoke flying around, and yeah, but it was just such a different thing, and I really enjoyed doing the stuff with Gary, because obviously he's got such an amazing following and still has. So it gave me a completely different look at the music business and how things are done for them. And again, because his mum Beryl used to do his makeup and she did mine, and we became great friends. And Beryl became a really, really good friend. Well, the whole family actually, and they were really nice to me. And so I used to hang out with them a lot, obviously over the years. And I was really sad, when she passed away a while ago. I was really sad that she wasn't with us anymore, because she actually was a really good friend. So lovely lady.
She actually, whoever you talk to, she was an amazing woman, and she was good for. I mean, I remember Andy McCluskey telling me that because they toured with Gary in '79, and when they went out to go out on stage, because she ironed all their clothes for them, and then shoes for them, She thought they looked too scruffy at the time,
That's what she would do. And so she didn't take any prisoners either. You didn't want to mess with Beryl. So I was always very, very nice to her.
But then, because Automatic didn't come out until '89, did it? So that's quite a long period, wasn't it?
Yes, well, we had our sort of different careers. Then we did, I think we did four singles before Polydor, maybe 3 singles before Polydor decided maybe it'd be good to do an album, because obviously anything you did with Gary pretty much went straight in the top 40. It wouldn't necessarily, they didn't kind of follow the success of Change Your Mind, but I think they thought, well, let's do the album. And I have to say, they put a lot of effort into it. I really liked the artwork, the pictures. I mean, we went to this disused power station to take the photos for it, and the end product was art-wise was great. And I thought they were going to put a lot of backing behind it. They released Automatic as a single, and that didn't kind of do as well as they'd hoped. And I think because of that, they suddenly decided they didn't want to put more effort into the album, so it didn't really do as well as they had hoped, or excuse me, or as we'd hoped. So it's a shame, really, but it's something. I mean, I remember clearly making the album, and we had a lot of fun doing that. Gary before when we worked together, I kind of finished the track, and then he'd come into the studio and sing the vocal. And with that album, when we were told they wanted us to do the album, I'd written all the basic tracks with a melody when I'd sing, and then send them to him, and then he'd write the words, which is how we did the whole thing. So he kind of left us alone in the studio a fair bit. But as we were working on the album, he realised that we were having great fun doing it. So he'd drop in a lot more often, just to sort of hang around and make a few comments here and there. But it was great that he kind of really gave me a lot of freedom in terms of doing the backing tracks. So it just worked well. It was good fun, really enjoyable.
Any talk of maybe trying? Could you have done it live, or do you think there's just too much going on?
I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah.
Change Your Mind. I mean, you could play it live, but there's so much stuff on the record that you couldn't recreate it quite the same. But with a good rhythm section, and I remember all the sounds, because most of the album really was, in those days, I did it on a DX7 and a Prophet 5 on a drum machine, and that was it. So I can even remember the presets on the DX7 for the intro on Change Your Mind, all that stuff. Bass was the Prophet, Yeah, obviously it could be recreated. A question of whether he'd want to do it. I mean, if somebody said, "Why don't you do a one-off special gig of just do the songs on automatic?" It's a fair bit of work to put together, but yeah, I'd be up for that. But I think Gary maybe's musically perhaps in a very different place now. So all I would say to people is never say never.
Well, never say never. I mean, you never know with Gary where he's going to be next year. So he's very dark and heavy nowadays, isn't he? I mean,
it's changed a lot. So I know the stuff I did with him. People would probably the people who're not too keen on it would probably say it's a bit too puppy for Gary, maybe. But as I say, also there's been a lot of people who've made nice comments about it. So
a few years back, Automatic was selling on eBay for over £100.
So that again.
Automatic was selling for over £100 on eBay.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Is that the vinyl?
I believe it was both.
Right. Wow. Oh.
I'm going back a few years, but they were paying silly money for it,
Well, I know because Cherry Red re-released it, didn't they? Which was quite nice. So it's probably or the CD anyway. So it's a lot more available now.
Well, I think with Amazon Music and everything, you just press a button, you got it within a minute anyway, haven't you?
Well, yeah, sadly.
Well,
don't get me going on streaming.
no, but it's the days of going that up to City or something to a record shop are gone, haven't they? I mean, it's I know what you mean about streaming, because I would say to my children, well, what are you streaming it at? What bit rate or something? And they just look at me as if to say, well, you're talking about Dutch, we don't know.
I'll tell you what's nice though, because every year we go and play in Japan and in Tokyo and Osaka, particularly in Osaka, we always pick this hotel because it's opposite Tower Records. And in Japan, they still have big record stores because they like to buy CDs and vinyl. So we go to Osaka, and then the next day, because when you're on tour, you kind of try and avoid each other during the day because you're spending so much time together. But we always find ourselves in the shop. And I love going in there and I just listen, and they have all the listening stations. So I listen to different CDs and kind of just hang in there. It's like the social experience, which is great. It's something that is sadly lacking really the rest of the world, I think, these days.
But where do you see the music industry at this very moment in time?
Well, I don't know. I feel I have this conversation with lots of people really, and funnily enough, the rest of the band don't really agree with me. I'm not a great Spotify for me it's fantastic for the user. I mean, it's a great algorithm. It works really well. You pay your 10, 15 quid. You've got all this music and it suggests stuff and, knowing how it works. I don't have it myself, but as an artist, it's a nightmare because nobody, unless you're maybe Ed Sheeran or you get like millions and millions and millions of streams, nobody really makes any money. Or can you excuse me? I just need to.
Yeah, I believe someone like Coldplay had something like 17 million downloads off Spotify or whatever, and got a check for like £32.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And unfortunately, the guy that runs it, they all pay themselves very nice salaries. So they always loses money because they pay themselves so much money. And so it's really, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'd actually take our music off Spotify because I think maybe then people might buy it. But until people decided, well, this isn't working. But a lot of the rest of the band and our business guy, they all say, well, at least it's there. People can hear it. They might buy a CD. So I don't get it myself, but
where do you see? I mean, with everything being shut at the moment.
Oh, well, it's just
How do you see? Do you see it ever rehappening, or?
I think the whole thing with Corona is that because of Spotify, because of streaming, the big part of any band's income, and that goes for the Stones or whatever else, the maybe 40–50% of the income now is from live music. So if you take away the gigs, particularly for bands that are starting, if they've got no live work, they've got no money coming in, say from Spotify. I don't know how people make a living now. I mean, in our day, we were lucky because we had vinyl and cassettes, and then obviously CDs in 1983. But we sold loads of records, so we could make. In those days, we made money from record sales, and touring was just a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of flipped around, hasn't it?
Totally.
Yeah, I remember Gary telling me a few years ago that he lost 15,000 on an album he brought out. And as he said, it's almost not. Everyone's got it before it's released anyway. It's because of the internet and everything. Sort of, it's almost a waste of time making records. Just, it's not a waste of time.
I think we're like in a sense in Japan. I say Japan seems to be a bit of an oasis to me in the world in terms of CDs and record sales, because, and it might be changing, but they seem to be, they're very loyal, and they do buy stuff. They buy CDs. They like to buy the product. So we still sell records in Japan, and that keeps everything going. Rest of the world is different, and again, that's probably changing as we speak. But as far as the future goes, I mean, I don't know, until they find some way of people feeling comfortable sitting next to each other in a theatre, although it's ironic that everybody seems to be very happy sitting next to each other on an airplane for 2 hours, but you won't sit next to someone in a theatre.
I know.
So it's there are some weird anomalies, but I do fear for lots of musicians, and not just musicians, but artists, people in theatre, singers, like chorus line, all those people who just lost their work, and until they get some kind of, not necessarily the cure, but the ability to be able to socialize again, I think it's really just brought the music business to a crunching halt. I mean, we're actually, sorry?
I was going to say, you don't realise the whole scale from just the roadies to everything.
That's it. Everything. And our sound guy, he works with loads of different bands, not just us. His, no work. So I don't know what he's doing. I mean, unless you've managed to, quite a good business. But so as you say, from crew, sound guys, all that kind of stuff, all the way down. I don't know how people are getting by.
No.
And it's, I mean, maybe we had a big, because this year was our 40th anniversary, so we had a big tour lined up all over the world.
Yeah.
And gone, postponed till next year, starting in March. And now I'm thinking, well, will we be able to get back in March?
Who knows? Who knows?
Obviously, but it's the same for everybody. So you can't moan too much, because we're all in the same boat in so many different industries as well. So I guess we just have to try and do the best we can. We've been putting stuff on Facebook, and
I know. I mean, it's like my wife. I built this office for her over Christmas, and because she's a self-employed travel agent, and she hasn't done one booking this year. It's just been refunds. And that's, you just don't realise it just goes on and on, doesn't it? So,
I thought people were starting to travel again though, but she's not finding that.
Well, she did have some people going to Portugal next week, but obviously they're not going there.
Well, yeah. Well, having seen the news yesterday and today about the second wave, I kind of thought there'd be headlines on the BBC or Channel 4 today saying that the shops have run out of loo roll and pasta again. The second wave of mad panic buying.
I know, that was crazy. All right, Bill, that's been brilliant talking to you.
Oh, pleasure. Sorry, yeah, it's just I do suffer a little bit with the old.
No, that's fine. So. I mean, that's what happens, isn't it? I seem to have got the sun coming in, and I'm just disappearing on this screen, I think. I should have sat over there in the shade, but no, but that's brilliant, and hopefully things will pan out for everyone next year, and maybe I'll pop along and see you on tour.
Well, please do. Always welcome. But I know Gary. I think he have a big drive-in thing
We did, yeah.
organised, but then that got cancelled. I think, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading today someone's doing a live concert of a description that you all got to be in pods. You're not allowed to sing or dance. And I thought, well, that's defeating the object of wanting to go to a live gig, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very. We're actually tomorrow. We're doing a virtual gig from a club we play at in South London. We're doing it. It's the first time we haven't seen each other for 6 months, so we're doing it. No audience, obviously, and people. You buy a ticket for I think £10, and it'd be weird because I think we have done a few gigs in the early days to no audience because no one turned up. But this will be weird because normally there's like 250 people in there, and so it'll just be empty. So it's going to be strange. But as I said, for everybody, everybody's probably finding different ways of doing stuff, drive-ins or virtual gigs, or like as you say, pods, or some way of playing.
Yeah, I mean, I know Gary wasn't the only one doing these drive-ins, but I don't think any of them have they?
Right.
As far as I've read, it wasn't just Gary.
I mean, across the board, yeah.
Yeah, I sort of got the concept of it. I don't know though. For me, if that would have worked, but I see how it could work. But no, not for me. But hey.
Well, I wish you all the best, for the rest of the year, and stay safe. And I know that they've stopped using "stay safe," but I think it's the best thing to say, really. I mean, I'm not particularly alert, I have to say, so I just stay safe.
Well, I think we're all learning to keep to ourselves a little bit, and maybe sometimes, we're doing things we should have always done. Not all of it, but sometimes, you sort of, yeah. But yeah, well, you look after yourself.
You too. Great to chat, and yeah.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I'll put this on YouTube in a bit later, and I'll send you the link.
You can edit out the bad bits, can you? Like going off and blowing my nose and stuff.
I'll probably get rid of the beginning, but that's about it. I'm not that great. But it all makes for the fun of it, doesn't it?
Okay. All right then. Take care.
All right. Time, mate, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Oh, I've got to turn it off now.